Welcome to Archaeopolitics, a MuggleNet.com podcast about politics in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. As always, I am Adri, your host and a recovering English major. Today, I am joined by Cassie of the Podrificus Totalus Podcast, and we're talking about the politics of loss in Chapter 34 of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. Before we get into the show, I'd like to ask you for a favor. I want to hear how Harry Potter, reading it, watching the movies, or what have you, have impacted your politics as they are today. So you can do that in a couple of ways. You can send us an email at info@archaeopolitics.com. You can also leave me a voicemail at 915-996-1699, or you can contact us through social media, so at Archaeopolitics everywhere. I want to hear all of your stories, and they'll possibly be featured on an upcoming episode of Archaeopolitics. Now on with the show. Episode 434. That means Goblet of Fire, Chapter 34. I am joined by the one and the only Cassie from the Podrificus Totalus Podcast. Hello, Cassie.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited. I mean, I already have my own podcast to talk about Harry Potter, so why not spread that to more podcasts?
I feel like this is my goal, is to bring on not as many podcasters, but as many Harry Potter podcasters as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many out there, and when I was playing around with the idea of starting a podcast, I'm like, I love Harry Potter. There are a lot of Harry Potter podcasts out there, but the Harry Potter community is so good that there's room for so many Harry Potter podcasts, and we should all love and support each other.
There's room for all of us. And I feel like I've made such great connections and friendships with fellow Harry Potter podcasters, and they've all been so kind and welcoming. And yeah. I could not have asked for a better podcasting community.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, I just want more collaboration across the board. Can we just make this happen? Everyone, please reach out to me. I will welcome you with open arms.
Me as well. I would love to have guests on because we never have before. So we're trying to, but yeah.
I mean, Cassie, I've already invited myself to your podcast.
We talked about this before.
Before we started recording. Listeners, I will invite myself to any podcast that you have. So just so you know, if you have a podcast, especially if you have a Harry Potter podcast, I will invite myself. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a series about love and friendship and junk, so that totally fits.
Also, it's a series about how Gryffindors are the most extra house of the series. And as the true Gryffindor, I am very extra.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the houses. Totally, yeah.
But right now we're not just going to talk about me and how extra I am. Listeners already know all about this. And they're like, could you please shut the fuck up about how extra you are and how it's a Gryffindor?
But isn't the definition of being extra talking about how extra you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's true to character, but I feel like maybe our listeners or the listeners to this podcast may not enjoy it quite as much as I do. But we are not here just to talk about me. Obviously, I love talking about myself, Gryffindor. But tell me, when did you first encounter the magic of Harry Potter?
So my first experience with the series was when the first movie came out, which is probably the case for a lot of people. And I think that was 2001. So I would have been 6 or 7 years old.
Oh, you're a baby.
I don't know. I turned 25 this year, so I'm having an age crisis right now. But
Talk to me when you turn 33, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that. But yeah, so it was when the first movie came out, my grandma took me to see it. And of course I loved it. And from there I picked up the books and read through them. And I think up to Goblet of Fire was out at the time.
Yes.
Yeah, and then past that, I just kept up with them as they released and like went to the release parties and stuff.
So you quite literally grew up with these books.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with Harry Potter Legos as well.
I was a teenager, so that's like a little bit different, I think.
Yeah,
Experience.
I'm always interested in that, how people come to the series at different times, because like I have friends that have come to the series as adults for the first time and they just somehow missed out on the craze, and how that kind of informs their experience with it, I think is super different, and that's what I think is so interesting about discussing it.
Yeah, I think that's also really interesting. Like, my husband refuses to read the books.
Oh no.
And yeah, I made him watch the movies though. And he's been a guest host on 4 episodes so far. So he's read a total of 4 chapters.
Mhm. Wow.
So,
There's a lot more than that.
so he's a total expert on Harry Potter, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, it's a similar case for my boyfriend, who's also my co-host. He had seen the movies pretty much as they came out, but he'd never read the books before he met me. And so, like, the first couple months of our relationship, he borrowed all my books and read through them. And he's like, "These books are really good." I'm like, "Yeah, they're really good."
I feel like my biggest failure in life, and I haven't discussed this on the podcast before, so listeners, you're getting a treat, is that he's the only boyfriend I've ever had that I've never, like, serious boyfriend, not just like a fling,
Yeah.
that I've never been able to convince to read Harry Potter. My first boyfriend out of high school did not want to read Harry Potter. I convinced him to read Harry Potter. He became a fan. My college boyfriend, my first really serious boyfriend, also read Harry Potter because of me and became like a huge fan, borrowed all the books from me. Like, his mom was really happy because she was a reader too. And she also read Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out. Obviously, I'm not married to that guy, but we did spend 6 years together.
Oh, wow.
And it was, fully, and I've spoken about before, fairly emotionally abusive relationship. Glad I'm out of it. But
he did read Harry Potter.
Yeah, but he did read Harry Potter, which is like the only redeeming quality he has. My husband is a great person, refuses to read Harry Potter, and that is the one villainous trait and my biggest failing as a human being.
Time to wear him down.
Well, he keeps saying, like, I have to read Dune if whatever. And I was like,
oh, wow.
I don't know.
That's a big compromise.
Yeah, but then even then when I said, sure, I'll read Dune, because I'm like calling his bluff, he's like, I'm still not reading Harry Potter. I'm like, how is this a compromise?
We actually did something similar. I'm a big fan of Gilmore Girls. And
yes.
I was trying to get my boyfriend to watch it. And, he's not like a macho guy or anything, but he's like, I don't think I'm interested in watching Gilmore Girls. And we made a deal that if I watched the first season of Steven Universe, he would watch all 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls. And I really don't know how I conned him into that.
Okay,
we only
Cassie,
got to season 5.
We have to talk offline about how you conned
it. I don't think I could pull it off again. It was very early in our relationship, so I think he was trying to not mess up.
Impress you, yeah. So I feel like I just missed that window.
Sure, yeah.
And by the time we got really, really serious and, things were really solid and he was not trying to impress me as much. I mean, he still tries. He like redid my closet, which I think is an honorable feat.
That is nice.
So it's not like he doesn't try, but it's just the one thing I've failed at.
The Gilmore Girls, yeah.
Oh, no, Gilmore Girls he's watched with me. It's Harry Potter.
Okay. Oh, Harry Potter. I'm sorry, yeah.
No. See, like, that's the thing. Things you wouldn't think that he would, you would think he'd refuse Gilmore Girls, right? But no.
Right. It's such a
Harry Potter.
Though. It's so funny, like, and it's good, like, comfort television. Like, eat a bowl of mac and cheese and watch Gilmore Girls. It's just the ultimate comfort experience.
It is. It truly is. So, sadly, my failure is about Harry Potter and not Gilmore Girls. I could probably live with the fact that maybe he hasn't seen Gilmore Girls if he, refused to, but accepted Harry Potter. But I just got the other way around.
Yeah. Well, you can work on it. You can keep wearing him down.
Sure. I don't, I think one of my friends and guest co-host, Alex from the Elixir of Life podcast, she's hilarious. And she keeps messaging me, just tell him that your guests keep backing out at the last second and you'll force him to read the entire series.
That would be cruel, but effective.
Well, sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind, but
yes. I think sitting down with a book is maybe a bit more of a commitment to some people than watching a TV show. Although if your husband is reading Dune, I think he could commit to the Harry Potter series.
Well, he is a reader. That's the weird part. But I think also it might be an age thing where he just missed that generational thing completely.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
He was in his 20s, when these came out.
Yeah.
Or late teens, early 20s, and just missed the fad completely. He was not a parent trying to get his children into it.
Yeah.
He was not a young teenager getting into it or a child. So it's just one of those things where he just missed the boat.
Yeah, yeah. And I have heard from people that have come to the series as adults that the first couple books are a bit of a slog because they skew so young. But I think as of I would say even Prisoner of Azkaban a little bit, they start to grow up and I think have more appeal for adults. But yeah, it sounds like he was in that weird segment of people that were caught between the young fans and the older fans. Yeah, so I can see how it would be tough. In a way, though, I think it would be easier to get into the series if you're not caught up in the fandom and the craze of it all. Because I get exhausted seeing too much of a thing. I see a lot of Good Omens stuff on Tumblr, and I'm like, man, I never want to watch that show because I see so much stuff about it on Tumblr. And that just makes me bitter. So I feel in 5 years, maybe I'll be willing to.
That's exactly what I think made him not read it.
Yeah.
Seeing too much of it everywhere. And he was like, oh, that dumb children's thing,
Yeah. And I mean, through just pop culture osmosis, even if you haven't seen the movies, sat down to watch them all, I feel you kind of know the plot of Harry Potter, and that might turn some people off because there's not really a surprise to it anymore.
Well, I think I just had a thought, Cassie. Maybe my con is that even though I'm ambiguous about having children, I have a child with him. And that's how we all get into Harry Potter.
Oh, that's a long con.
That is a long, arduous, and sacrificial con on my part.
That would be impressive.
I just had you so your father would read Harry Potter.
That would be so fun. That's what, I mean, I am a certified English teacher, so of course I feel the power of books and reading very much, but that's what I think is so cool about Harry Potter, that so many people got into it from a parent reading to them, and it got so many young readers into reading. And yeah, it's just so powerful for that reason, I think.
Well, so you are also a recovering English major as myself. That's how I call myself, because once you're into studying English in any form or fashion, or certified in your case, you never really grow out of it.
Yeah. It is a little different for me because I was a dual major, so education and English, so I didn't get.
Oh wow, we're here with
as much English.
We're here with royalty.
But I switched for my master's, which I'm working on now, educational technology. So that might say something about the weight that being an English major puts on you.
I think it really does. I did both my bachelor's and my master's in English, and it put me off of reading and writing for a while.
That's what's so hard about it. That I graduated with my bachelor's last May, and in that time, I have read one book for leisure. And because it's so hard, especially now that I'm doing my master's, to pick up something and read for fun. And even when I do pick up something and read for fun, I'm looking at the language use is really interesting in here, and I like the narrative framing. And it's just, you can't shut your brain off and just enjoy a book.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I couldn't for a long time even enjoy a movie because I took a few film classes as part of my English degree. And I was like, oh, the framing of the shot is like unconventional and interesting in this way. And I'm like, can I just enjoy the thing?
Yeah, it's really frustrating, and I feel that too with a lot of the like women's studies courses that I took. That like now, whenever we go see a movie, I'm like, hey, women were treated like garbage in this. Like I hated this, and it's sad because I'm like, I would love to just sit down and enjoy something without thinking about the higher meanings in it.
Well, and I think that's what I mean by recovering English major.
Yeah.
Once you peek behind the curtain, there's no going back.
I wish there was. I've been trying to find a way.
It's really hard. I kind of distanced myself from media for a long, long time to try to recreate that. But once you know the theories, you know the theories.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe what I should try is just reading some like really schlocky bad literature like Nicholas Sparks or something to kind of like cleanse the palate. But I don't know if I could do that to myself.
Like grief porn. Not great. Not great.
What is grief porn?
Well, you know, all the like Nicholas Sparks novels, like someone dies.
Oh, sure.
Grief
porn. Okay. I've never heard that term before. Yeah, but the book
which we're talking about Lost today, which
that's a good segue, actually.
Everything converges, but not yet, because I have so many other questions. We just went off the rails.
So what's your next question?
Okay, so we know I'm a Gryffindor, obviously. What are you?
Probably coming in as no surprise, Ravenclaw.
I am surrounded by Ravenclaws. I keep saying this.
I think a lot of the people that are still engaging with the Harry Potter series are kind of thinkers. And so it's a lot of Ravenclaws. And also a lot of people are ashamed to like come out as Gryffindors because it's kind of seen as the like default house because that's the one that all the main characters are in. When in reality, it's a very interesting house with its own unique traits. But yeah, there are a lot of Ravenclaws out there.
Yeah, I mean, every quiz I take, you know, if I'm very honest about how I answer it, the result is always Gryffindor. So
yeah, I think on like Quizilla in 2005, I might have gotten some that said Gryffindor, but since then it's all been Ravenclaw.
Well, and that's great because that means that you engage with text on a higher level than I do.
Sure. We'll see.
Who's your favorite character in the entire series?
Can I have two? Is that allowed?
Of course.
Definitely Hermione. In terms of like the major characters, it's hard to not love Hermione. Especially because I feel I relate to her a lot. And who I was when I was younger and who I am now still. And then also Molly Weasley. I think Molly Weasley is the ultimate loving maternal figure in these books. And I have a real soft spot for her.
She is mom goals, though.
She really is. I like cry every time she shows up in the books because she does such sweet things like sending Harry Christmas presents when she only met him for 5 minutes and the sweaters. And she's the greatest.
Except for when she treated Hermione like crap because she thought she had broken Harry's heart.
When was that? I don't remember that.
Rita Skeeter wrote about it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, but like even then it's coming from a maternal place in regards to Harry. So like I can't even fault her that much.
But also kind of awkward because Hermione becomes her daughter-in-law eventually. Yeah,
I kind of think that if she was comparing like so this is kind of embroiled into larger discussions about the relationships that the characters end up in. But I feel like if Molly Weasley were to look at Ron and Hermione, she would be like, you know, Ron, you did pretty well for yourself.
Yeah, Hermione, I'm not sure about you, dear.
yeah. Like there's a league difference there in the Ron and Hermione dynamic.
All right. So if you were a character in the Potterverse, as I am going to call it from now on, what career would you have?
So as I said, I'm a certified English teacher, so I would like to think that I'd be a professor. the difficulty is that they don't have like normal subjects at Hogwarts, at least that we've seen. It's all like magic. And I would really love to teach those kids how to write an essay, because I feel like a lot of the grief that these kids go through with their homework is like, we don't know how to write an essay on dragon's blood or whatever the hell. And yeah, that's probably because their education stopped when they were 10 years old and they just transitioned to just doing magic. So I would add a writing class.
A writing teacher at Hogwarts. I find that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Has the series impacted your politics? And if yes, how?
Well, I came to the series at such a young age that I think a lot of tracing its impact in my life would be philosophical, in the sense that it is a series about love and friendship and standing up for what's right. So I think that those overall arching ideas have definitely impacted me in a way, and my dispositions. It's so hard to separate, because there wasn't like a clear moment that I was like, I was this age and then Harry Potter came into my life and I changed in this way. It was a long drawn out relationship from, when I saw that first movie to when Deathly Hallows came out, which was like 2008, 2009. Yeah, so it's hard to trace that impact. I think the bigger thing that I've taken away from it is just a love of literature and stories. But yeah, I think that the philosophies behind it definitely have informed my viewpoints.
Yeah, I find a lot of people's answers have a lot to do with either like friendship and love, or just standing up for what you believe in, and being brave in the face of adversity, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those crazy people that like reads the news and has to put it in a Harry Potter allegory of like, oh, these neo-Nazis are like Death Eaters and we need to, I don't engage in that. I don't think that's how we should understand like our modern political system. But no, I think that those fundamental ideals are things that people should hold close to their hearts, whether they're, voting for a political figure or just living their everyday life.
Yeah, and like I try to shy away from like those comparisons in the podcast, not because they're not easy to make. They're too easy to make.
Right, because it's just a story about oppression and power, and so
fascism.
Yeah, and so that story, that allegory, can be applied in so many different contexts. It's not like this is Animal Farm and there's a direct parallel to a certain historical figure. It's a lot more broad and thematic than that.
Well, which is why it's so universally appealing.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm like super interested in dissecting the politics of what's happening in the chapter, and if it has something to do with with the theme of loss, we can definitely talk about it. But it's not something where I'm just like, well, this is definitely an allegory to what's happening right now. Or we can see the politic right now, but we can also see it in the chapter.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so chapter 34. What happens in this chapter exactly? How does it begin, and how does it end? Well, Harry starts off in the cemetery where he is kind of unbound and Voldemort's risen again.
Yeah, and Voldemort's like full on taunting him.
Voldemort's really being a real dick, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I mean, he's Voldemort, so like in character, but yeah, he's really all. It's like 3 or 4 times that he's like, Harry, bow down to me, like, Harry, do this. And yeah, it's definitely indicative of how like controlling and manipulative he is.
Well, and then it's not just Harry and Voldemort and Wormtail. There are Death Eaters.
Right, yeah. So like Harry's trying to like hide and keep his legs from shaking where all these people are like glaring in at him. He's like, oh, I'm gonna die here. Also,
he was bit by a spider not too long ago.
Yeah,
on one of his legs.
Well, that and Cedric's body is like 10 feet away.
Well, just small things, small details.
Yeah, and like I have to say, I'm surprised by how short page-wise and like word-wise this chapter is, given how big it is in the book and the series as a whole. It was like 6 pages long or something.
And also a lot happens in those 6 pages. Sometimes Joe can give us 20 pages of nothing.
Yeah, but this was very much like, ooh, okay, a lot is going on here.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is the first instance in which we see both Harry and Voldemort's wands connect in that weird way where
Yeah.
Voldemort's like, what is happening?
Yeah. Like it just this chapter has ramifications for like the entire series going forward, and kind of all these graveyard chapters. It's crazy. Like when you sent me the chapter that we were doing today, I'm like, oh wow, like that's a big one. Cool.
Yeah, and it's a chapter that kind of foreshadows the significance of his scar, the significance of their connection
Yeah.
to each other. And it's something, a mystery that is to be solved in books 6 and 7.
Yeah, absolutely. Of like Voldemort's mortality, and yeah, it's all in this chapter. It all goes back to this. And that's why part of why I love Goblet of Fire so much, that I think it creates a big turning point in the series, and it plants all those seeds for like the eventual overarching plot of the next couple books.
Yeah, and I think obviously that's done on purpose because you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff is maybe planted books 1, 2, and 3,
Mhm.
but 4 is really heavy on the
Yeah.
exposition of these plot points.
Yeah.
So we also see some spirits coming out of
Yeah.
Voldemort's wand.
Yeah. And this is the chapter 2. I don't know if you know about this, the whole controversy of when this book was first printed.
Oh, yes, where the order was wrong.
Yeah. So it was, oh gosh, I'm going to get this wrong. James came out first. Yeah.
James came out first before Lily or something. And
Yeah.
in the way it should have been is James came out last because he was the first person he killed when he entered the Potter's house.
Yeah, and Rowling has since said something about like we had an editing deadline and it passed by us, but I remember the like threads on like forums and on LiveJournal just like speculating about why this is, and oh no, we got the wrong version of the story in previous books, and yeah, so it was a big thing.
Oh God, it was so. Yeah. So, yeah, I knew about this coming into it. But what was your first thought when you encountered the scene as I want to say 8-year-old?
Yeah, probably around that. Honestly, it's hard to remember, both
yes,
because it was
you're a child.
Yeah, it was so long ago, and I'm sure that I was reading it at like midnight on a school night when I shouldn't have been, but I just couldn't put the book down. It definitely would have been a big moment. I mean, of course, it was a big moment because it's a huge moment in the series. But yeah, I can't remember. It definitely raised a lot of questions for me about like the nature of what was going on between their wands, and I think it's emotionally satisfying in a big way to have James and Lily appear in some capacity and like directly talk to Harry as well.
I know. I felt like it was like a family reunion, but such a sad one at that.
Yeah.
And like Cedric telling Harry, please, like, take my.
Oh, yeah. That's actually okay. So talking about our initial reactions to this chapter, I was deeply in love with Cedric Diggory when I read this book. Something about that illustration of him on the cover just really did it for 8-year-old me. I was so you can imagine how upset I was when he was killed, and then to like see him again. And I always remember this scene and the scene following it in the movie of Robert Pattinson saying like, take my body back to my dad, and then the next scene of Amos like screaming in pain. It's really tough.
Well, and I think part of what makes it so hard, for me at least, like Cedric's death, is that it's so sudden. It also reminds me of later on Sirius Black's sudden death. And it's, I think, the lack of violence that makes it so violent to us.
Totally.
Because it's just sudden, and in the way that death often shows up, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of books and also in real life, that it can be so sudden and so anticlimactic.
Yeah,
that
no,
it hurts
absolutely.
more.
Yeah. Is it cool if I drop a spoiler for Deathly Hallows? I don't know if you keep spoilers to minimum.
I did talk about Sirius, and that's book 5.
Okay,
So
fair.
go ahead.
True. Yeah. No, it's kind of like when in Deathly Hallows, Tonks and Lupin die and like Fred die, and it all these things are just kind of mentioned in passing. Like there's this whole battle going on, and it's just like Harry walks past their bodies, and that's very much how loss is sometimes, especially sudden loss, where there's no build up to it. It's just this horrific accident or this really sudden onset of something, and then it just happens, and so you're sometimes not even there to see it. So I think that the book mirrors that really well in pretty much all of the deaths that happen.
Well, and I think as readers, we experience loss when we read those moments, and we can empathize with Harry because these were so sudden, especially Cedric's death, which was the first sudden loss that he's seen and experienced as a sentient being, because he was not a baby, right? So he can feel that. And
and I think that's something that Rowling does really well in this chapter and in the graveyard chapters kind of preceding it, of mentioning the physical presence of Cedric's body to the point that it's even kind of eerie. I remember her mentioning it like over and over again. And I think that that is a great way of emphasizing to the reader and mirroring to the reader the sort of trauma that Harry is experiencing of both the emotional loss of Cedric and the physical loss, and having to deal with like the physical body in addition to like missing them as a friend and somebody to talk to.
Well, and I think that kind of segues beautifully into today's topic, the politics of loss, and how loss is sometimes intertwined with this feeling of helplessness.
Oh yeah. And especially with Cedric, because he's been not like a big brother figure to Harry, but he's helped Harry through this entire Triwizard tournament. And so to lose him and to be in this super vulnerable state is
I think more than a competitor, Cedric became a teammate to Harry in the end.
Yeah, that's a better, I think, explanation of their relationship rather than like a brother. Definitely a teammate.
Because they were both like representing Hogwarts, and they were both trying to help each other out. Whereas I don't see Crumb or Fleur Delacour trying to help Harry.
Yeah, and part of that is just Cedric's disposition, that he's just a really nice guy. And that makes the loss of him so much more tragic, because it is senseless and like, not to say some people deserve to die more than others, but Cedric really didn't deserve to die. He was just a kid that entered a tournament and had nothing to do with the larger machinations going on here.
Yeah, he was a genuinely good person, is what we're saying here. And that's also why it's so jarring, and how we all feel helpless as readers, because we cannot change that fact, right? So we experience that loss and helplessness, just as Harry experiences that loss and helplessness. So we're both, as readers, empathizing with Harry and also feeling that same helplessness and loss that Harry is feeling.
Yeah, totally.
And I want to talk about loss, and like loss is something that we all grapple with, whether it's a senseless massacre, the natural loss of our loved ones, loss of our dreams, the loss of our innocence, and so it goes on. And by the time this comes out, so it'll be a little bit old news, but I mean, this past weekend we had another mass shooting, and we've had to grapple with two mass shootings, by the way. So we've had to grapple with like this feeling of loss and helplessness as a nation. And even when people want to do something about it and say like, no, we need to move on beyond thoughts and prayers, like there's a contingent that pushes back against that and says, no, it's lack of religion that is doing this.
Or the violent video games. And
so which is kind of, that's where my helplessness kicks in. And I'm like, guys, we need to fix this.
Yeah. And especially as a teacher, it's really scary, because so many of these shootings happen in schools, that to think that, I picked a career where I want to help children, and to expose myself to that is scary.
Well, you want to help children and not have to make escape routes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And New York State actually just passed, I live in New York, just passed legislation saying that teachers can't be forced to carry a gun. And I'm like, God, that we even need a law for this is.
Well, and one of the things that people like pointed out is that, for instance, at Walmart in El Paso, I used to live in El Paso. I used to go to that Walmart. So like this is like super close to home for me.
Yeah.
Is that there were armed people at that Walmart, and not one of them was able to like stop this from happening.
Yeah, and this is something I've actually been exploring through this research project that I'm doing about young adult literature, kind of developing a subgenre of what we're calling crisis literature in response to events of the last 20 or so years. Really, I would mark it with Columbine and 99, of kind of large-scale trauma that's inflicted on these things, that even if you're not personally there, and even if you don't have a personal connection, like you have to where the El Paso shooting occurred, or if you didn't know somebody that went through it or whatever, you still feel that, and it still changes the way that you look at the world. And I think that that's a lot of what is going on in this chapter, and kind of its after effects of that kind of sense of fear that Cedric's death has instilled in the entire wizarding world.
Well, and I think that, loss and helplessness is also intertwined in this chapter, in the way where we see for the first time that Voldemort returns to power, or is returning to power. We see his cruel demeanor more in focus than we've ever seen it before.
Right.
In the way it's like senselessly orders the death of this quote unquote spare child.
Right. And part of it is because when he orders Cedric's death, he's not quite at his full power, but he's almost there. This is Voldemort.
That's what I mean. Like, in his way to full power. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this is Voldemort at his most confident that we've ever seen him. Like, his plans have worked. He's been building towards this for a long time. And so we're seeing him, maybe at what we should have expected him to be, 10 years ago, when he was at his height of power before he attacked the Potters. And and it's scary. And that definitely instills that sense of helplessness in the wizarding world, to the point where they do eventually just kind of deny that it's happening at all.
Well, because we'd rather, in politics and as humans, right? Mm-hmm. We'd rather deny an inconvenient truth by telling ourselves a nice old story. Yeah.
And that is where we kind of talked about this earlier, of understanding modern political events through the lens of Harry Potter, that this works so well as a mirror, because that is what we do in response to difficult, traumatic things like this. We kind of just turn our eyes and say, like, oh, somebody will figure it out, and we don't need to do anything.
Well, and then we see also that Harry has lost so much, and up to this point, this is the first I would say, like, this is the first loss he remembers, this clearly, and that has such a big impact on him, on his own life.
Totally.
I mean, he's lost freedom before. He's lost friends before. But not to the extreme of
they were murdered in front of him.
Yeah. He's lost his parents, but he doesn't remember that happening.
Yeah.
And he still has so much more left to lose in the series.
Yeah.
And I wondered, as we think about loss in this chapter and in future, in looking forward to Harry's future, why is loss seen as something that a protagonist, especially Harry, must go through to achieve growth and to achieve his end?
Yeah. So, like, from a character development standpoint, you need these kind of events to happen for the character to grow in relation to them. And looking at Harry Potter as kind of a Bildungsroman, or a coming of age novel, you need those kind of traumatic events to help the character grow. So in that sense, I get it from a narrative perspective. And then also I think loss is just a part of life. So in that sense, it's inevitable for the character to go through that. If nobody ever died in the Harry Potter books, they wouldn't be quite as exciting as they were, and they wouldn't be quite as, I think, true to life experience as they are.
I was going to say realistic, and then I realized that this book has magic.
That is true, and that's something that I always go back to when I like think a little bit too much about the series and like the things that happen. I'm like, it's magic, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, what makes the series so compelling is that it grounds that magical world in a really real human drama.
Yeah, of course. Like, it wouldn't be nearly as compelling if you could just resuscitate the dead and be like, and just kidding, I'm back.
Yeah, and that's something that I think having on my podcast just finished going through Philosopher's Stone, I'm realizing with the kind of new perspective that I'm bringing to the books as an adult and going through them so thoroughly is how much loss just rings through these books, especially Philosopher's Stone, how much Harry is so deeply affected by his parents' death, even if he doesn't physically remember it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those two things, right? Where he loses so much, but he also gains so much.
Right, exactly. And so the ultimate power in this series is love. And so the pain of loss is kind of the tax he pays on that, I think. That in order to have those really powerful relationships that he develops with people at Hogwarts and the ancillary people like the Weasleys and whatnot, he kind of has to experience that. You know, it's like a net gain and negative. He has to balance out at the end of the day.
But, you know, acting as a direct foil to Harry, I don't think Voldemort as an entity that we get to know has really lost someone he cared about because he doesn't care about anyone.
Right. Yeah.
And he's just angry. The only thing that he's just angry and bitter about is that he's lost power.
Right. Yeah. So truly the only thing that Voldemort loves is power. And so I think that is that key difference in the series that separates him from Harry, and what allows Voldemort to commit the monstrous acts that he does is that he never has loved someone and lost someone.
And I don't think he's capable of love because he doesn't understand it.
Right. Yeah. I've seen a lot of like good debate about that within the fandom of like, there's this theory going around that I don't think was ever like explicitly said in the books of because of the like weirdness surrounding his conception that he's not capable of feeling love. I think that Rowling has since said that it was because he was never loved in his life that he kind of came out this way. I think the Voldemort we see in this chapter is maybe not capable of love anymore. I don't know. It's a weird thing and a weird question of like why Voldemort is the way that he is.
Well, also we get to see Voldemort as a newly risen from his snake baby form.
Yeah.
We don't get to, like, we barely get to see Tom Riddle, right, and Chamber of Secrets, and we get to see glimpses here and there, but the previous Voldemort, the Voldemort maybe before he even made the Horcruxes, we don't know who that person really was. We only know the person he is now, Snake Baby returned to skeletal form by Wormtail.
Yeah. That's and I think that no, it's okay.
I just can't get over Snake Baby. Sorry.
What was I gonna say? Oh, right. And I think that is something great about the messaging of the series and Harry's character is that at least in Deathly Hallows, he never gives up on that idea of trying to find that humanity in Voldemort and trying to compel him to feel something. And trying to get that Tom Riddle back. And ultimately, I don't think he's successful. And I think Voldemort is too far gone. But I think it speaks a lot to Harry that even in the face of the awful things that Voldemort has done, both generally and like directly to Harry, Harry is still able to, I think in a sense, try to teach Voldemort to love and try to bring that back out of him.
Oh, Harry, always trying to fix everyone around you. I get you, my friend, but also What an exercise in hopelessness as well.
Yeah, but that's what makes Harry so great, is that even if the cause seems impossible, he still stands up and tries to do what's right. And that's what's so powerful about that interplay in this chapter that we see of Voldemort constantly trying to get Harry to bow down to him and accept his death, that Harry says, like, no, I'm not going to go down without a fight. I'm going to keep standing to what I believe in to the very last moment.
Even if it costs me. Well, I think this is a good time to move on to the quote that you thought was most closely associated with the politic of loss in chapter 34.
Sure. I kind of took the beginning of a quote and then abbreviated some stuff and took the end of it. So bear with me because I can't really read ellipses out loud. But I don't remember what page it was from. It says, though, it's right when Voldemort casts the Imperious Curse on Harry. And it says, and Harry felt for the third time in his life the sensation that his mind had been wiped of all thought. And it was bliss not to think. It was as though he were floating, dreaming. And the dream state was lifted as suddenly as though cold water had been poured over him. Back rushed the aches that the Cruciatus Curse had left all over his body. Back rushed the revelation of where he was and what he was facing. And I think that that's a great representation of the kind of mental and emotional process that we go through when we do experience something traumatic like loss. Like almost like when you wake up after something really bad happened the last day and you go to sleep and then you wake up the next morning, and for a second you have that moment of bliss where you think like, oh, it was just a bad dream. Like I don't have to think about that anymore. And then gradually reality sets in and you have to actually accept what that is. So I think that was interesting and spoke to me. And I think it also speaks to me in the sense of escapism, that a lot of people's reaction to loss is to pretend that it's not there and try to get that blissful dreamlike state, however they might achieve that. And you ultimately have to come back down to reality and accept what's going on.
Which is why a lot of people escape into substance abuse when they experience loss, because you're trying to chase that moment of blissful ignorance.
Yeah. And I think that that's interesting that it's represented here through the Imperious Curse, that it kind of wipes your mind out. I don't know. I don't think that that's supposed to be a representation of like substance abuse or anything within the series. But yeah, it struck me. It's something that I never really think about with the Imperious Curse. I always think about the control aspect of it, but I don't really think about the effect on the control-e, I guess.
Well, and a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people seek out substances to wipe their mind clean because they don't want to be in full control of their thoughts and their body and their mind. Whereas type A people like me highly regulate things so they don't lose control.
Yeah. And that's something I don't drink. I never drink. I never have. And that's something that always scared me about it as kind of a control freak, of kind of giving myself over to something and not... yeah. And like not being in control of myself scares me. But I can definitely see, of course, as a human and as somebody who's gone through traumatic events, looking for something that will just take you out of it for a little while. And I think there are healthy ways to do that. Like a lot of people, me in particular, like when we've gone through really depressive episodes, going to something like exercise to kind of take you away from it and put that into something productive. But unfortunately for a lot of other people, they either can't find those things or can't get the help that they need. And so they're just always chasing that like blissful escape.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, but I think that Harry does something really interesting here in resisting the Imperious Curse. He resists that urge to just stay in that blissful state.
Mine is a little bit different. I think we avoided the obvious ones, which I'm really excited about. Mine is on page 662, and it says, "We are not playing hide and seek, Harry," said Voldemort's soft, cold voice, drawing near as the Death Eaters laughed. "You cannot hide from me. Does this mean you're tired of our duel? Does this mean you would prefer me to finish it now, Harry? Come out, Harry. Come out and play. Then it will be quick. It might even be painless. I would not know. I have never died."
Mm-hmm.
And this one to me spoke of loss, but not in the way that we usually think of loss. I think Voldemort has lost his humanity a long time ago.
Okay, yeah.
And he lacks, empathy. He lacks the ability to love and all these things. So he boasts that he has never died before. And to be able to die is like the most human thing that I can think of.
Yeah, totally.
And he is boasting about this loss of humanity that he's had as if it makes him somehow better and above everyone else. And he's taunting Harry with his loss of power that he's regained, but mostly with his lack of humanity.
Yeah.
Which is not something to be proud of, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that loss of the sense of mortality is important to Voldemort. Of course, he's terrified of mortality and like being able to die, which is why he like creates the Horcruxes and everything. But I think that living with the knowledge that you're going to die is what leads a lot of people to love and grow relationships, because you think like, I have to use the time that I have productively and to share myself with other people. And so Voldemort having lost that is just another reason why he's so awful.
Yeah, and he's proud of having lost it, which is even worse.
Yeah, and I can see why. So we see like a temptation narrative in these books a lot with Voldemort and Harry, of Voldemort trying to get Harry to come to his side and saying like, I can give you the power that I have to not die. I can give you the power to protect people and to bring people back from the dead even, which is something I think he suggested to Harry in Philosopher's Stone on the back of Quirrell's head. He's like, together we can try to bring back your parents or whatever it was. And so I can see how that would be a tempting thing for Harry, because he is such a human character and somebody who is so affected by loss. And I think it's interesting that Voldemort manipulates people with that, because he is so far gone.
Well, just because you're not human anymore doesn't mean you don't understand people's motivations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And he's a master manipulator. He's able to play to that.
Oh, what a bad person.
Yeah. And sometimes I kind of get on the Harry Potter series for having such a sort of clear division between good and evil. Like Voldemort is evil. There's nothing like redeemable or sympathetic about him, really. But yeah, I think that Rowling, at least, she makes a good villain. She makes a villain that you really hate.
Well, and I think sometimes, we like lump into like Voldemort, but she has villains that are even more in depth than Voldemort. We have Professor Umbridge. We have Gilderoy Lockhart, and all these like mini bosses, if we want to call them that, where you're like, I fucking hate you.
Yeah, and I think Rowling has said too, like, besides Voldemort, Umbridge is like the most evil creature in the universe.
Well, and we also have complicated good characters like Dumbledore, who we get on like book 7 to get to know a little bit better, and all his like shades of gray that we didn't know before. Yeah. And I feel like that was a necessary, you kind of have to tear down your heroes in order to move on and to grow. And as much as I love Jo, I don't agree with all her like Twitter stances. So I feel like I too need to tear down my heroes in order to grow.
I think that though, equally, now that I'm thinking about it, she does offer compelling bad characters like the Malfoys, who do evil things and align themselves with evil, but who do go beyond that and have, we understand their reasons, like how they got there.
Yeah. I mean, I think actually the most two-dimensional character in the series, and shots fired, is Voldemort.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I think in Half-Blood Prince, she tries to kind of go into his origin story, but it's never in a way, I think, that's meant to garner sympathy for him.
Too late is what we call that.
Yeah, he's already murdered a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's a Hitler character.
Yeah, totally.
For me, like a despicable character that even though we're like, oh, he was just a frustrated artist, I'm like, boo-hoo,
He
I don't
killed
care.
a lot of people.
I'm also a frustrated artist and you don't see me creating the end of the world.
Right. But then, and then you have a character like Malfoy where it's like, hey, he does some really crappy things, but like we kind of get it and we kind of sympathize with him sometimes.
I mean, sometimes, but like I've caught a lot of flack because I've said Draco Malfoy is a Nazi. And I said it in a particular chapter. I didn't mean his entire trajectory as a character. I just meant like in the discussion we were having about that chapter, he was literally acting like a Nazi. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. I think what's hard about that, though, is that he's somebody who has been bred into fascism. That how could you grow up in that household and not absorb some of those ideas? So it is tragic, but that doesn't excuse anything that he does.
I mean, yeah, but then we have characters like Sirius Black who grew up in similar households and rebelled against that.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm here all night, folks.
No, it's a good point. And I think that speaks to that recurring theme of standing up for what you believe in, that Sirius had the courage to stand up against what he clearly saw was unjust. And there are other characters that switch back to the good side for less honorable reasons, for more self-motivated reasons.
Yeah, and I can't look at that and be like, sure, this is exactly who I want rooting on my team, Right. I think I have like this idea of like courage and fairness, and I have definitely stood up for myself and others quite a few times and gotten burned for it. That does not stop me from doing it. So whenever someone is trying to take the easy way out or lie about something or just being dishonest in general to like, not catch flack, I have a really hard I have a really hard time sympathizing with that. And maybe that's a me problem and not a them problem.
But I mean, the books are ultimately neutral on some characters. They leave the reader to decide how to react to more complicated characters like Draco or Snape even. But I think that to that point, before those characters are so complicated, the ethos of the series is very much stand up for fairness and what you believe in. And so I don't blame you as somebody who loves the series to walk away from it and keep that idea in yourself. And we see it so much in this chapter, and that those exchanges between Voldemort and Harry, of Voldemort trying to get Harry to respect him or whatever his motivation is, or just to control him, and Harry saying like, no, I'm going to stand and fight.
So what I'm hearing is that the reason I get in trouble so much is because of Harry Potter.
Just blame it on that. Say like, well, I'm a Gryffindor and I can't help it.
Sure. I don't know if my boss will actually believe that, but we'll see. I don't think he's a Harry Potter fan. Also, I don't want him to know about the podcast, things. But so we talked about our quotes. Which character in this chapter you think kind of like represents this politic of loss the most?
I'm going to go with the really easy answer and say Harry. And I think that's probably in a lot of chapters. It's just, Harry is the one that exemplifies this because he is the character. But I think I've realized what an undercurrent James and Lily's deaths are throughout the series, and Harry is just constantly trying to build that parental relationship through kind of the artifacts that they've left behind, and cope with the loss of that parental relationship that everybody else has gotten to experience. And so I think in this chapter, he is uniquely empowered by that loss, that he understands that his parents died for what they believe in and to protect him. And so he is willing to do the same. And that literally happens in that exchange that Harry has between the people that he's lost, between him and James and him and Lily and him and Cedric, that he realizes that he's fighting so that nobody else has to experience those things.
And it just occurred to me when we were speaking about loss and his parents that not a few hours before this scene, he had been chatting with Mrs. Weasley and Bill, because they were the de facto family that he has come to
Right.
the wizarding, the Triwizard Tournament as the family members that are there for Harry, and how this scene in chapter 34, where he sees the ghosts or the spirits of his parents show up for him, is both a scene of loss and gain in the way where we are reminded of his loss, but also Harry gains a memory of his parents that is not told to him by someone else, or not a memory he sees in a pensieve or anything else, or a picture. It's a ghostly, yes, memory of his parents as they were.
Yeah, and that's one of the first times that he's ever gotten to interact with him. With
exactly.
them.
Yeah,
and it's tragic, but I think that it motivates him and empowers him, and that contrast that you're talking about with his kind of loss of his relationship with his parents, with the gain of the Weasleys as a family, is something that I saw a lot in the Mirror of Erised chapter in Philosopher's Stone, because it happens over Christmas, and Christmas is this joyous thing for Harry where he finally gets presents and he has somebody to share the holiday with, but he's still just so affected by what he sees in that mirror and becomes obsessed with it because he has that kind of gaping wound of loss within him. And so I think that this chapter has a similar contrast to it, a similar conflict within it. But we see Harry sort of rising above that loss and fighting against it rather than just having Dumbledore take the mirror away. So I think it shows Harry's growth and that he is learning from what's happened in the past and learning how to cope with loss.
And maybe if he didn't have that interaction with the mirror, he wouldn't have risen when he saw the spirits of his parents, and how sometimes the obstacles and the lessons we learn along the way in our lives prepare us for more difficult things to come.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it is supported by the books and what happens within them. That all these awful things that Harry experiences are what make him the powerful figure that he is in Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, and it innately equip him to be the hero he needs to be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's another obvious character. It's Cedric Diggory, because he's the one who goes to Harry and says, hey, like, my dad is going to feel this loss. And you know what's important to me is that he gets my body at least.
Yeah. And I think that helps Harry stand and fight in a way, because Harry, I don't think, ever got a sense of closure from his parents' death, both because it happened so young and because he grew up with the Dursleys. So I think that Harry committing to bringing Cedric's body back is Harry committing to helping Amos deal with that loss and get the closure that he needs.
Well, and Harry is his best when he's doing things for other people's benefit rather than his own.
Right. Yeah. Cedric absolutely embodies loss in this chapter. And it's so tragic to lose a character like Cedric.
I mean, especially tragic for 8-year-old Cassie.
I was really affected by it.
Who had a massive crush.
I did. And I remember too, as a kid, I talked in my sleep a lot. And my sibling, who I shared a room with at the time, did tell me on more than one occasion that I was talking about Cedric in my sleep and how I didn't want him to die. And it's just, he's so good that it's hard to lose him.
Baby Cassie sounds amazing.
I also had a big crush on Oliver Wood, so like I had a backup, but Cedric had really eclipsed Oliver Wood at that point. Okay,
you and I are going to have to discuss this later, because we're going to fight over Oliver Wood.
Oh, that accent really got me.
Yeah, I feel like he was a foundational crush for many of us.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
I did see Sean Biggerstaff not 1 feet away from me at the Leviosa conference, and he just walked past me, and I was like, hello.
Like, how do you react normally in that situation when it's like, yeah, I lusted over you when I was a child?
Well, I was a teenager, so
that's fair. That's true. Yeah.
fairly a little bit more appropriate, I think.
The appropriateness question gets to me sometimes because I have taken to referring to Oliver Wood as my boyfriend Oliver Wood, and that
you too? No.
and like that was acceptable when I was, 12 and Oliver Wood was 14. When I'm 24 and Oliver Wood is 14, it seems a little bit creepier, but
well, in my mind, he's grown up with Sean Biggerstaff, if that's makes
true.
It
okay.
acceptable.
Has he been in much stuff post Harry Potter?
Yeah, I think he's been in some like English productions of things,
okay.
but not like anything that's crossed over significantly. Yeah, so I have to put you in contact with Alex from the Elixir of Life podcast because I feel like we're going to have to like flip 3 coins for this.
We'll just start an Oliver Wood podcast.
Yeah, sure. So she also refers to him as my boyfriend, Oliver Wood. I also refer to him as my boyfriend, Oliver Wood. I'll send you a picture I have of like Sean Biggerstaff on the panel.
I would really enjoy that.
And I sent it to her while I was at Leviosa and in California this summer. And she was like, why is AJ sending this to me? She almost asked me, why, like, did you mean to send this to me? And then she zoomed in and she was like, no.
I would freak out if I was within a 50-mile radius of him. So.
Well, I knew that he was going to be there. And I told, I was telling everyone, this is going to be a really interesting test of how much control I have over my body. And I was really cool about this. And I didn't fangirl not even once, but also I did see him up close.
I always try to think about how I would react if I did meet a famous person, because I never have. Well, I met Michael Kors once, but that doesn't really count because I didn't care.
Whatever. Like, overrated is my thing.
Yeah, he came into a movie theater that I worked at, so like it really didn't matter at all to me. But if it was somebody that I was had more of an affection for, I don't know how cool I would be.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine. I'll send you that picture later. All right.
I'll enjoy that. Yeah. Back to death.
Well, actually, I think we're done talking about death.
Oh, okay, good.
I think it's time for us to talk about happier things? Question mark. I usually end this podcast talking about media that we have been consuming, my guests and I. So tell me, what have you been enjoying lately?
So I have been rewatching Veronica Mars with my boyfriend. I've watched the first 3 seasons before, but we're rewatching it together to prepare to watch the new season. So that's really good. But the problem is that my boyfriend's out of town right now, so I can't watch it. So instead, the last 2 days, I also binged Fleabag, which is an...
Yes!
Yeah, it's so good. I watched...
Listeners of the show will attest to how many times I have proclaimed the genius that is Fleabag.
It's so good. Like, I'd been meaning to watch it for years, or at least since it came out and I saw like the promo image. I'm like, oh yeah, I want something to do with that. But then last night I'm like, let's start Fleabag. And I finished it this morning.
Isn't it amazing?
It's so good. It was so funny. And I knew it would be funny, but it did an incredible job of balancing the humor with the sort of human drama, and it ties in pretty well too with the politic of loss. Yeah,
Yes.
especially that first season. Yeah, God, what a show! But I also love Veronica Mars. Veronica Mars is awesome.
I love both of those shows equally, but for different reasons, and both have like quippy heroines who are sometimes unlikable. I think I like Mars both of them. Less than Fleabag, but she does do some things that are sometimes unlikable, but as a whole, I think both of the characters are likable because they're flawed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. God, what a show. Yeah, I those are the two things that have been consuming me, I guess. I don't really have a book unless you count Educational Psychology 10th edition.
Okay, what did you think about Hot Priest?
Hot priest. I didn't find him that hot.
The
Because
blasphemy.
well, see, so he was the guy
Moriarty?
in
Yeah.
Sherlock, which I've never watched Sherlock, but I have been on Tumblr, so I feel like I've watched Sherlock.
I think you have, yes. Correct.
So like, I've seen a lot of GIFs of him looking crazy. So that maybe informed my experience a little bit. This was the first time I had ever heard his voice, and I will say he does have a nice voice.
He does. He does.
Yeah, and I loved the plot between the two of them. I thought the relationship was great. It's just personally, I did not find him hot.
Okay, so here's the thing. I do not find him hot as Moriarty ever. At all. So to me, like, him as Moriarty is slick, slimy, gross. Ugh, no. No, thank you. Next. Him as the priest. I don't know if it's because I grew up Catholic. I don't know if it's because I identify with Fleabag. And like, Fleabag is my basest self, I feel like a lot of the times. And I don't know if it's because I could tell that he's the only person in her life who actually saw her.
Yes, that was what was so powerful about it, that like there was this progression of him noticing her speaking directly to the camera, and him being the only character to do that was wild.
So like, not to get too personal, but like, my biggest turn on is people understanding me.
I feel like that's not something you should be ashamed of.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, being seen and being understood and being recognized instead of being treated like an object. Wow, look at me being an actual growth of a person. It's actually like the hottest thing for me, because don't we all just want to be seen?
Yeah. And that's what was so powerful about their relationship. Oh, it's so good.
It's one of the best shows ever.
It really is. And I loved the relationship with her sister too.
That is actually another, like, the progression between both seasons. Like, you kind of know that really at the heart of this, I mean, we joke about Hot Priest and all that, and there was some really hot moments there, but the real center of Fleabag is her relationship with her sister, and how that evolves and how that crumbles and how that's rebuilt, and how her sister finally breaks free from. And I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this for everyone. You've had time to watch this.
And like, we're talking about the broad strokes of the plot. It is a much different experience to like watch the show.
Yeah. And how her sister finally feels the agency to break free from society's expectations of her in the way that Fleabag already has, and how Fleabag does the kind of almost the opposite in a good way, where she kind of reels back a little bit from like being too free, right? And kind of takes ownership of her life instead of being a cannonball, like just destroying everything in her path.
Yeah, and seeing them kind of grow and learn from each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Is so good. It's also so damn funny. It's so good. I remember I paused it. Sorry, what was that?
The haircut scene? Amazing.
Oh, yeah. And I remember I paused it too in that scene where she meets the toothy guy on the bus.
Oh, yeah.
And Amazon has that thing where it'll tell you the actors in the scene and what role they're playing. And because hardly anyone in that show has an actual name, he was the actor, his character's name was labeled as Bus Rodent, which I laughed about for a very long time.
She is fantastic. Like, really, she is fantastic. And little known fact to me, her actual sister is the one who made all the music for the series.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah, the music especially was a big thing in season 2, that like choral.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. So she works really closely with her sister for Fleabag. And she also works really closely with her best friend who like, so I've listened to a few interviews and podcasts she's been on.
Mhm.
And I think she's brilliant and amazing. And I just want to be like her when I grow up.
I like her, not like Fleabag.
No, like her. And like the thing about Fleabag is we when women create something, we assume that is based on their stories.
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, we can see glimpses of her, and she is very honest about that. But she's not Fleabag at all. She says that she's someone who's eager to please other people. So really, more she's a Claire, if we're really being honest.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that women get to make complicated characters like that. We have so many male characters in television and media that are like maybe anti-heroes in a way, that like we can't agree with everything that they do, and sometimes we're cringing at them, but we still root for them. I'm thinking of like Walter White in Breaking Bad. And so you don't see that often, that a woman gets to write that character and be that character. And that's where I think Fleabag is also really, really powerful.
Yeah, I think that that's the reason I like it as well, because I don't like Mary Sue's, right? Male or female, because we have a lot of male Mary Sue's as well. And also I just want complicated female characters who dare to say what's on their mind, even if I don't agree with them.
Yeah. And it did strike me too, a lot of similarities to The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I don't know if you watched it.
Have I watched it?
Yeah. Just their haircuts were really similar, and so I was like, God, she reminds me of Midge. Yeah.
Outspoken,
all great shows.
Brash, amazing. Well, I just watched the pilot for Veronica Mars because I am working on a super secret project that I will disclose later.
The pilot's so good though. Like that is, I think, one of the top pilots in TV history, along with like Twin Peaks, and Veronica Mars is up there too.
Well, the thing that I thought about when I was watching the pilot was, because I haven't seen this in, almost 10 years.
Okay.
Wow, this is a memorable pilot. And those two words often don't go together.
Yeah, so many pilots are just like throwaways, or like you watch them after you've watched the whole series before and you're like, oh wow, they changed so many things between like the pilot and the actual show being filmed. But Veronica Mars, at least from what I can remember, was fairly consistent throughout the whole season. And that speaks to it being a kind of murder mystery thing where the big plot events were already mapped out. But yeah, what a good pilot.
Well, it also shows that pilot also shows that this series was well thought out. It wasn't just one script that kind of made it.
Yeah. That kind of falls apart, I think, by the time you get to season 3. But
we are not talking about that yet, Cassie.
Well, I'm in season 3, so I can complain about it a little bit.
Okay. All right. Well, but you have a Harry Potter podcast. Tell us what it's about and where we can find you.
So my Harry Potter podcast is called Podrificus Totalus, which is our punny little name for it.
And I love it.
We went through a long process of picking names, and then my boyfriend Joe suggested, and then I'm like, we can start it every episode by saying, "Don't move a muscle. The podcast is starting," and so that's why we started that way.
This is beautiful.
Yeah. We really went with that pun. But yes, it's called Podrificus Totalus, and it's every episode is a chapter. We try to go into kind of the trivia aspects of it, and sort of the I don't want to say literary, because I think that's being really generous to the conversations that we have. But I try to bring at least some of the literary analysis in there. I do a lot of like etymology stuff and mythology connections, in addition to just talking about it from a reader response theory perspective and from a just pure enjoyment of the chapters in the series. Yes. So that is my podcast.
So what you're saying is, and I can be your hype person if you want, is that there's something for everyone.
Yes.
And it has high highs, mediums, and low lows that are a fun ride.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. There's a battered sausage line that is definitely in the low lows.
And we all have those, and that's fine. That's why we have podcasts.
Yes. Yes. So Podrificus Totalus, we just finished doing Philosopher's Stone. We're on a bit of a break right now while we bank some episodes to do Chamber of Secrets. Yeah. And you can find us at Podrificus on Twitter or go to our website, podrificustotalus.com. I spent a lot of time making that website, so I plug it a lot more than social media because it has a lot of good info on it.
Well, that's great. I can't wait to invite myself on one of your episodes again.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
I can't wait for you guys to get into Chamber of Secrets and even more so the later books, because I feel like the more I podcast, the more I'm like, these episodes are getting better because the books are better.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. Like some of the early chapters, it was hard to talk about them with much depth. But that will definitely increase as time goes on.
Your co-hosts, are they also Ravenclaws, or do we have other house affiliations?
It's just one co-host, my boyfriend Joe, and he is also a Ravenclaw.
So it's a Ravenclaw Squared podcast.
I guess, honestly, if I had to, like, philosophically place him personally, I would probably put him in Hufflepuff, but Pottermore said Ravenclaw, so that's what we're sticking with.
Well, you know what? My husband is a Ravenclaw, according to Pottermore. But in my head, I for sure thought he was a Hufflepuff.
Part of the discrepancy, I think, between doing the Pottermore quiz and doing having somebody else like place you is a lot of this is who I'm reporting myself to be when you take the quiz. Versus like how people actually see me, which is something I think is reflected in like the choice that Harry makes with the Sorting Hat. But yeah, a lot of people are on the cusp between different houses.
Well, I think everyone sees me as a Gryffindor too. So,
and some people are just 100% their way.
And I just feel like a basic bitch, you know, like, oh, Gryffindor, woohoo. With my Ugg boots and my Starbucks Frappuccino.
I had a friend that had a real personal crisis when she was sorted into Gryffindor and Pottermore because she's like, yeah, it really is like a basic bitch diagnosis. It's just like, this
friend and I, we have things in common, I can tell.
Yeah, but you grow into it and accept it.
Yeah, once you embrace it, there's no looking back, really. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much for joining me in this lovely evening chat that we've had.
Yes, it's currently 10:30 p.m. here.
Support this podcast for as little as $2 a month on patreon.com/Archaeopolitics. Follow the pod on social at Archaeopolitics on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Email me at info@archaeopolitics.com with your thoughts, theories, and favorite moments of the series. You can also leave me a voicemail to be featured on the podcast at 915-996-1699. Theme music is Think Big by Scott Holmes. This podcast is brought to you by MuggleNet.com.